This video is brought to you by Captivating History. Man has always loved tools. In the Middle Ages, he would stand beside a furnace and forge swords and maces. He could feel the pop and crackle of the metal and the buzz and sheen of the blade. Time passed, wars were fought, generations were obliterated. But man stuck to his love for tools. When gunpowder was invented, his passion for metal did not go away, but it did get colder. Whereas a sword felt the pulse of the body, a gun was solitary, in command at all times. Wars started taking place on frontiers instead of plains and hills, and life became increasingly sophisticated. However, the thirst for power and competition still prevailed, and so wars were still fought with the same vigor and virility, and they still brought the same pain and grief. However, this was a pain unmatched. The world had never seen a war this big. The war that came to be known as the First World War was one of the deadliest conflicts in history. It gave the world around 20 million deaths, counting both soldiers and civilians. The Triple Entente, consisting of France, Russia, and Britain, stood on one side, while the Triple Alliance, comprising Germany, Austro-Hungary, and Italy, was on the other side. The war that captured the attention of the entire planet had several deadly battles. When remembering these brutal conflicts, one battle is recalled repeatedly: the Battle of the Somme. The First World War was a brutal event, full of heroic actions and heart-rending losses on both sides. Some men fought to the bitter end and died in the muddy fields of France, their bodies never recovered, and their final resting places unmarked for more than a century. But as time moves on and the First World War fades from living memory, most of these battles are not seen as single events, but threads in the progression of a whole. The battles of the Somme and Verdun can be seen as a microcosm of the First World War, encapsulating all its valiant deeds and unspeakable horrors. Neither of these battles can be discussed without mentioning the other, as the conflict at Verdun played an important role in determining the outcome of the Somme. Let's follow the road to the Somme, shall we? At the onset of the war, many believed that the technological advances of the Industrial Revolution would result in a devastating but swift war. By the end of 1915, the war that many had predicted would end by Christmas 1914 had reached a virtual stalemate. Nothing had gone as either side had predicted it would. The Allied powers and the Central powers suffered heavy losses, and neither side gained ground. The Western Front was a mess. The Germans had failed to neutralize France, and France had sacrificed 300,000 men to repel the Germans. Austro-Hungary struggled with supply shortages, a high casualty rate, and low morale. The British had failed to wrest the Dardanelles from the Ottoman Empire, and the Gallipoli campaign had ended in disappointment for the Allies. Meanwhile, the Russians stumbled from one defeat to another and could not produce a major victory. This is how things looked by Christmas of 1915. Both sides wanted a strong start to the new year, setting the stage for the two bloodiest and deadliest battles ever fought on French soil. The British and the French rallied for a big push that would turn the tide in their favor. The British were tasked with supporting the French army while it coordinated and led the Somme offensive. According to the plan, the assault would involve 40 French and 25 British divisions. At the same time, the Germans were looking to attack Verdun, 185 miles east of the Somme. The Germans attacked first. The timing of their assault changed the objectives of the Somme offensive from driving the Germans back to distracting them from Verdun. The Battle of Verdun was the longest and costliest battle of the First World War. Fought on the hills north of Verdun-sur-Meuse, it lasted from February 21st to December 18, 1916. The Germans wanted to crush the French 96th Division before they were reinforced by the full deployment of British forces. The ancient fortress was an important target for the Germans because they wanted to make a statement. Within the first 3 days, the Germans had overrun the first line of French defenses, and thousands of French lives were lost. But the battle soon followed the course of many other battles of the First World War. Both sides became entrenched, and everything came to a standstill. The Somme offensive was officially planned for August of 1916, but after looking at the state of affairs at Verdun, it was advanced to July. The River Somme has always been a beautiful sight, except for in the summer of 1916, when the scarred and brutalized landscape mirrored the feelings of the war's victims. With their attention diverted to Verdun, the French could only contribute 16 divisions to the Somme instead of the planned 40, and only 5 of those were involved on the first day of the offensive. At the time, the British Army was not equipped to handle this kind of pressure. 11 of the British first-wave divisions for the Battle of the Somme were either territorials, volunteers who had previously served with the regular army, or belonged to the New Army, another volunteer army with little to no experience. One British battalion only had 3 officers, one of whom was deaf, another had a badly broken leg, and the third was 63 years old. The Germans knew that the advance at the Somme was imminent, so they positioned their troops effectively. The British artillery blasted at the German lines for 5 days, but the results were underwhelming. The bombardment did not eliminate the barbed wire, nor did it annihilate the German defenses. From July 1st to November 18th, the two sides would engage in one of the bloodiest battles of the First World War. It was 141 days of relentless back and forth across the 40-kilometer stretch on both sides of the upper reaches of the River Somme. Over 1 million men would die or be wounded by its end. Cue the infantry assault. The Germans had hunkered down in their trenches, and when the British troops advanced, the machine gun fire mowed them down. Total carnage ensued. The second wave of the British attack did not fare better than the first. The British 31st Division had lost 3,600 officers and men by early afternoon. Other divisions underwent a similar fate. Only the 13th Corps registered any notable success as they managed to capture the entire headquarters of the German 62nd Regiment. The first day was a catastrophe for the Allies. The British witnessed 60,000 casualties, and almost 20,000 of those were deaths. That number is higher than the casualties the British suffered in the Crimean, Anglo-Boer, and Korean Wars combined. In simple words, it was the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. The British paid the price, but the French were more experienced after learning their lessons at Verdun. Furthermore, the French had to traverse a more favorable land, and their equipment was better. So the French 6th Army did quite well against the Germans on the first day, only suffering 1,590 casualties. However, the British had suffered such heavy losses that any chance of capitalizing on the success of the French was lost. After that troublesome first day, the Battle of the Somme became a dragged-out war of attrition. At this point, it is important to note that the Battle of the Somme was not just a single drawn-out battle, but a collection of several battles fought around the River Somme. The first of these battles was the Battle of Albert, which commenced on July 1st and continued until the 13th. After the initial Allied attack, the battle raged for nearly 2 weeks, with neither side gaining much ground. During this battle, the British started to use the creeping barrage method, where the barrage would move slightly ahead of the advancing infantry. On July 14th, the British 4th Army attacked the German 2nd Army from Deville Wood westwards toward Bazentin Ridge at night in what is known as the Battle of the Bazentin Ridge. Due to poor communication, the British could not maximize the situation's potential over the next couple of days. The German 2nd Army recovered sufficiently to launch a counterattack. On July 19th and 20th, the Battle of Fromelles commenced. The 5th Australian Division fought alongside the British 61st Division to advance through the heavily fortified German front line position near Albert Ridge in Flanders. The Germans had retreated from their front lines to underground bunkers during the British bombardment. As a befitting reply, they shelled the assembly area and the communications trenches. After suffering heavy casualties, the Australians managed to breach the line, but they were forced to withdraw because no support was available. The South African 1st Brigade, attached to the 9th Scottish Division, fought and held out against the Germans at Deville Wood for 6 days and 5 nights. The Germans considered the strategic site so important that they left no stone unturned to win it back. At the height of the encounter, the German artillery fire averaged 400 shells a minute. The Battle of Deville Wood continued from July 14th to September 3rd. A few days later, on July 23rd, fighting began around the village of Pozia. Within the next couple or so days, the Allies had captured the entire village. The Australians were crucial in taking the village and suffered 5,285 casualties. At the beginning of September, the Allies captured the village of Guillemont while suffering heavy losses. Now, the advance toward Flers and Courcelette was easier. A few days later, the Allied forces also captured the village of Jauchy, bringing the British front line closer to the main German defensive line. On September 15th, the Battle of Flanders commenced. This day is remembered for the introduction of the Mark I tank, the first time tanks were used on the battlefield. Even though it did not make a considerable difference in the Battle of the Somme, it changed the face of modern warfare in years to come. As a new invention, the tanks were not without faults, and most of them broke down or were destroyed quite easily. The Battle of Flanders was the first full-scale offensive since that brutal first day. The 41st Division managed to capture the village of Flers, but the German defense line halted their advance. On the same day, the Canadian Corps of the Reserve Army captured the village of Courcelette. However, after the initial success, the Allies were unable to break through the German lines. Later in September, the two sides were locked in the Battle of Morval and Thiepval. The British forces advanced through heavy machine gun fire and took Morval, east of Flers-Courcelette. At the same time, the British Reserve Army was launching an attack on a strong defensive German position north of the village of Thiepval. After some initial failures, the Allies managed to capture the village with the help of artillery shelling. The heavily fortified Schwaben redoubt fell to the Allies as well. By the end of September, the weather had worsened and constant rain dramatically changed the landscape. At the beginning of October, the Battle of Transloy Ridges took a similar route as the earlier battles, as some objectives were achieved and others were not. On October 1st, the Battle of Ancre Heights took place, and the Canadian Corps advanced some 400 yards that first day. The attack was postponed repeatedly, and by the end of the Battle of Somme on November 18th, only the ridge north of Courcelette had been taken, accomplishing only one of the many objectives. The final battle was the Battle of Ancre, which started at the dawn of November 13th. A mist enveloped the landscape, and only one tank reached the German front line. The attack was a relative success, as the Allies captured Beaumont-Hamel and Beaumont, but the northern part of the German line remained untouched. The rain only worsened as the days passed, and the weather conditions favored the defenders. Eventually, the British realized the futility of continuing the campaign and called an end to the offensive. After the intense 141 days of fighting, the Allies had advanced 7.5 miles and had lost 420,000 men. The French had suffered almost 200,000 casualties, and at least 500,000 Germans were killed or wounded. What a waste of Europe's promising youth! The Battle of the Somme lives on in the collective memory of the British nation for the unimaginable loss of life and the permanent psychological damage it caused. To learn more about the Battle of the Somme, check out our book, The Battle of the Somme, a captivating guide to one of the most devastating events of the First World War that took place on the Western Front. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.